Thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Langoven. I appreciate being here and meeting so many new people, seeing so many new faces. Sometimes I go to these conferences and I see the same people, which is also lovely, but it's also wonderful to meet new people and hear different ideas. I'm learning a lot here today already. As you heard, I'm the National Organizing Manager, or the Program Director, basically, for the Secular Student Alliance. And just a brief word about the Secular Student Alliance. We have about 300 chapters around the United States on college and university campuses that support and resource young adults in the expression of their secular identity and activism on their campuses and in the communities around them. And it's a great privilege that I have. It's a fun job. I used to be a pastor, and so in a way I feel like a secular pastor now to all these young adults who are doing fantastic things around the country. And so this is what I get to do all the time. I'm also the Humanist Chaplain at USC. This is a photo from a recent one of our Sunday dinners. They gather around at the end of their Sunday dinner and sing a song about how life has no meaning, so we have to make our own. There's an expletive in there that I won't repeat, but it's pretty great. So we eat together and we have a lot of fun together. It's all student-led, so this is one of those Secular Student Alliance chapters at the University of Southern California. So Dr. Langoven asked me to speak about how to involve youth in humanism. And I recognize that the gray in my beard may belie my insight on this subject. I'm a Gen Xer, which means I'm, it's weird. I used to be invited to these things to talk about, as a Gen Xer, how to involve Gen Xers in the church back in those days when I was a member of the church and a young adult leader. And now I'm almost 50, and we're talking about Gen Z and how to involve young adults in humanism. So a lot's changed and a lot hasn't changed at the same time. So I want to just recognize that my viewpoint is as someone that's not youth anymore or young adult. I think of myself, it's a weird thing about aging, I think of myself in young adult terms, and then I sometimes see, like, this is a young adult gathering, ages 20 to 35, and I'm like, ooh, I'm a long ways from there. It's not my cohort anymore. But I get to work with young people, and it's a real privilege, and I think some of the challenges that we faced when I was a college student are similar challenges that college students today are facing, and also the opportunities. I'm also a white man, born and raised in a privileged context in the United States, so that undoubtedly informs my perspective. It takes a little energy, definitely worth the time and energy that I put in to gain the perspectives of other people that are different than myself, and I owe a great debt of gratitude to those that help me to see the world through lenses that are not merely my own. So what is humanism, and how can we involve more youth in humanism? I think one of the biggest obstacles to inviting youth and young adults to be involved in humanism is the lack of clarity about what it is. If you went to the University of Southern California and you said to random students walking across campus, are you a humanist? They would most likely say, what is that? Probably, it sounds good, right? Like it sounds positive, like we're pro-human, right? So that's good. Probably no one would be vigorously against humanism just based on the sound of the word. But they don't have a clear idea of what it is, or even that it's an ism, that it's a movement of any kind. And so this is a challenge for us. And I think that what the next generation perceives about humanism will be due in no small part to what we put out there into the world for consumption. And the American Humanist Association is the spokesperson in a way for humanism in the United States, and I refer very frequently to this definition. It kind of grounds me. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life. You could stop there and it would be a pretty great definition of humanism, a progressive philosophy of life, that without theism or other supernatural beliefs, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. Of course, the Humanist Manifesto goes on and on for many more sentences, but that's a pretty dense sentence right there, I think. Don't you think? There's a lot going on there, and I don't have time to unpack all that, and that's not my job today. But I offer that to us as a point of starting to say if we're inviting youth and young adults to be involved in humanism, it's a good idea for us to own it and be able to express it clearly ourselves. I, for myself, have worked with various different definitions and ideas in my own thinking, and I would recommend the same to you. To me, this is sort of a definition that I've worked with in my own life over the last many years. Humanism is a commitment without promises, without hope of salvation or an afterlife or a utopia in this life. That part's really important. A commitment to care for one another and build a safer world insofar as it's within our power to do so. So this is sort of me working it out for myself. In spite of the positive nature of these statements, I think we still tend to express humanism in negative terms. What it isn't, what we're against, and what we're opposed to. And I think the first thing I would say about inviting a new generation to not only participate in our humanism, but to create their own expressions of humanism, is to begin to offer forward-looking possibilities of what it would be like to define ourselves not as an alternative to something else, and that something else is sort of the main thing, right? But to simply start from the point of view of humanism and say, what is it that we aspire to in the world? What is it that we believe we should be creating in the world for the betterment of all people? And that's already what I'm hearing just in the few hours that we've had so far here at this conference. So this is a little what is humanism, who are the youth, right? I've never met a youth that likes to be called the youth either. But who are the youth or the young adults? So we hear a lot about millennials. How many of you have heard of millennials? They broke everything, right? You know, all these articles about, well, the millennials ruined so many things, right? Kids these days. How many of you grew up at a time when you heard your parents say, kids these days, right? So it's always kids these days. The first thing I want to say right off the top is it's not these kids, it's all kids, right? In every generation, face similar challenges, they're coming of age, and we can reflect, I hope, on our own growing up experiences in our own youth when we had these kinds of challenges that we're dealing with. But millennials, by and large, demographers say, were born between 1981 and 1996. How many millennials are in the audience today? All right, we have a handful. Well done. You've made it this far. But here's what's weird about getting older. The millennials aren't kids anymore. Look at that, 23 to 38 years old. Sorry, millennials. It's catching up to you too. They're not exactly youth anymore, are they? They're getting to be young adults, they have families of their own, reaching middle age. Well, now we're talking about the next generation, and a few years ago the demographers were batting around what to call it, and nobody gets to decide, right? There's no committee that decides what to call the next generation. It's just sort of what bubbles up in the culture and what sort of journalists latch onto and becomes the popular terminology. It seems that Gen Z is the thing. I don't know what we're going to do with the next generation. We're out of alphabet letters. I don't know if it's AA after that, you know, or like at a theater, you know, when after Z it's AA and then AB, and I hope not. That sounds terrible to me. But Gen Z was born between 1997 and the present. I'm sure there'll be a cutoff at some point. I don't know what that will be. I doubt anyone really knows yet. But Gen Z are 22 and younger, so these are your college students and younger, high school and college. My kids are this age. I have two daughters. One is a freshman in college, the other is a junior in high school, and so this is their world. This is their experience that we're thinking about, and it's the current generation of college students. What do we know about this generation? What are some things that you would think defines, well, first of all, how many Gen Z folks do we have here today? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, good. Oh, that's great, 7. Great, so please correct me after all of this, tell me what I got wrong, and see Dr. Langovan, because he wants to know how to involve youth in humanism, and you are the experts in that, right? Not me. So what do we know about this generation, though, just historically speaking, culturally speaking? What could you say with some confidence about this group of young people? Yes. They've always had the internet. I love to tell, as a Gen Xer, my college students when I was a professor that I got all the way through college without Google. It's an amazing thing, right? Like, it's hard to imagine that I was on microfilm in the library looking at magazine articles. It's ridiculous. No one should have to do that. What else? My daughter was born in the year 2000, my oldest. She was 9 months old as we were driving up the New Jersey Turnpike in September of 2001 to see my friend who lived on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. And we were halfway from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, to Manhattan when he called and said, hey, you know, an airplane's hit a building and traffic is going to be ridiculous. You need to reroute yourself over the George Washington Bridge. And we all know that it wasn't just a little plane hitting a building. It was much more significant than that. And it sort of put a pin in human history and in American history. And, you know, my daughter was just a baby at that time. So for most Gen Z, well, for all of them, they've grown up without an actual memory of 9/11. They've only been told about it, and they've grown up entirely after that moment. They've grown up as a result of that in the era of endless war. Generation Z has never known a time when the United States was not involved in a war or multiple wars somewhere in the world. They are the children of the era of school shootings, of rising inequality, and of catastrophic climate change. So this is a little bit, and it's not all that, you know, about this generation. There's also some wonderful things, but that's sort of the socio-political context of Generation Z. There have been a lot of articles recently about loneliness. Some studies have been done, and there's some articles saying, is this the loneliest generation? I would read some of those articles with a healthy dose of skepticism, but there are some really interesting findings. Whoops, I didn't keep up with the slides. There are some interesting findings about loneliness right now in the literature. This is a graphic from a Cigna research that was done. Cigna, of course, is the health insurance company. So they're interested in loneliness not for sort of sociological reasons, but for actually health reasons. And you can see the progression of loneliness as it goes down the generations in the recent survey that was done last year. What's not revealed in this work, and what I'm personally unaware of, is whether, you know, the boomers were this lonely when they were 25, right? I don't know. My guess is that they maybe so, right? And the other interesting thing that I didn't put in the slides is that Generation Z, in their research, the Cigna study, they found no correlation between social media and loneliness. So that's sort of the whipping kid for loneliness and all the problems, right? All the problems with this generation is attributed to social media. They're on their phones. And this particular study found no direct correlation between cell phone usage or social media involvement and a sense of loneliness. What that means is that there were just as many people who used their phones all the time and those that didn't that expressed a certain degree of loneliness. This is my sense is this is a function of just what it means to be 18 to 25. That's just that season of life. Loneliness tends to diminish with age, they found. But then there are definite exceptions. What this research also uncovered is that more than half of Gen Zers identify with 10 of the 11 feelings associated with loneliness. Feeling like people around them are not really with them, 69% said that. Feeling shy, 69%. Feeling like no one really knows them well, 68%. And they are among the most common feelings experienced by those in Generation Z. Why do I raise this issue? We're asking about how we can involve youth in humanism, and what we're hearing from them is that it feels like they don't have that many close relationships. They don't see people in person in real life. They don't have face-to-face interactions that are as meaningful as perhaps people that are older than them, partly because being young is alienating in its own way. In addition to these characteristics, I think this generation is remarkably visionary, radical, and revolutionary. So where were our youth yesterday? Where were they yesterday? Striking, right? The climate strike. Over 100,000, I read, people were striking in, I think, Berlin yesterday. I haven't caught up on all the reports because I flew all day yesterday. I felt so terrible. I was in an airplane flying on the day of the climate strike. I was like, this is horrible. If I were like Greta, I would have sailed through the Panama Canal and arrived here by boat, but I don't have that much, dignity. I just jumped on an airplane and flew over here. But, Greta Thunberg, is, how old? 16, right? So you want to know where our youth are and what they're thinking about. Greta's a good starting point for that, and the hundreds of thousands, millions of youth that were striking for the climate. And why are they passionate about this subject? This is their world. It's only going to get worse from here. And even if we did everything we knew to do right now to turn this around, it's still going to get worse for a long time before it gets better. This is the world that we have created for them, those of us that are older. So what do our young adults need from us who are not young adults anymore? Just a few suggestions, and these are just suggestions. More than anything else, I feel like our young adults need for us to be the people that we need to be. This is more about what we can be than what we can do for them. If we can be the kind of people that pass on responsibility for the things that the good things that we've done and also the bad things that we've done in a positive way, we will be inviting our young adults into meaningful relationships with us and with institutions and with their future. I think they need our faith in them. So many times I encounter groups that want to involve more young people in their humanist activities. They want to know, how can I get young people to come to my thing? Have you felt that or heard that? We have this meeting every other Saturday. How do I get young people to come to it? And I'm thinking, well, okay, first thing is, just don't think about it in terms of getting people to come to your thing. Because when I was a pastor, people would say, how do I get more people to come to my church? They would always ask me that question. And I would say, first of all, they don't want to come to your church. They don't want to sit in your pew so that you can say, I have more people sitting in my pew, right? They don't want to come to your event so that you can brag about how you have more young people at your event. It can't be about that. It has to be about something bigger than the attendance at your event or the membership roster of your organization. We need to think in terms of what is on young people's minds. What are their passions? Where are their gifts for leadership? I believe, too, the same thing I believed when I was 25, that young people need intergenerational relationships. And in order to have meaningful intergenerational relationships, we need to be more curious about the people that we interact with. And I find that older adults, are frankly terrified of young people. They're afraid to talk to them, And sometimes I'll be in an environment and they'll say, how do I get more young people to come to my thing? I'm like, well, which young people do you have in mind? Oh, I don't know any. Well, then how are you going to get them to come to your thing? If you don't know any, well, I don't know where to meet them. Well, do Do your group members have children? Do your kids go to college? Do they have friends? Like, talk to them. Listen to them. Ask questions. This goes for people of all ages, but I can't tell you how many times I'll meet someone new and ask some questions about them so I can learn about them. And what doesn't happen is they don't then ask me any questions about me. Does that ever happen to you? Where you say like, oh, Dr. Longovan, where are you from? How are you? Like, what's your work? What are you interested in? And he tells me all of those things, no, not picking on you, of course. And then that's it. I'm like, well, what about me? Don't you want to know about me? No? Okay. So I think it's important that we start with people, not programs or projects or lists, but people, the people that we want to engage with. How can we invite them into relationships if we don't know them and we haven't asked people about themselves? Sharing food together, sharing intentional conversations about meaningful topics together, and then actually involving people, turning over leadership of key tasks and responsibilities and leadership to young adults and letting them run with it. At the Secular Student Alliance, our staff doesn't run any clubs, none, because we're not on campuses. The students run all the clubs. They run their own clubs. And we advise them, we help answer questions, we help them raise money, we support and resource them, but they are the ones that are organizing their chapters to do the things that they are passionate about. And they are as different as A to Z, these chapters all over the country. Some are very interested in interfaith work, some are working on climate issues, some are having debates about whether there's a God or not, some are advocating for LGBTQ equality. They're all over the place. And they're driven by the passion and the desires of the students that lead them, not by the passions and desires of somebody up here who's telling them what to do. And I think if we turn people loose, young people that you think perhaps aren't quite ready for that leadership, give it a chance. Give them the leadership and they'll I think, surprise you. Our young adults are concerned about the world that they're inheriting from us, a world that we have unfortunately pillaged and profited from and now leave to them in a broken and dissipated condition. They're passionate about radical inclusivity, about welcoming a diverse array of people into their lives. My suspicion is that this next generation will put much of this xenophobia behind us, I hope. I guess we've probably hoped that of other generations. I think people hoped that for my generation. Do better than we did. And I think that our young adults can lead us into the future if we let them. But it's going to involve letting go of the reins of our institutions and inviting young adults into actual leadership where they can tell us what's next, that we're actually going to see youth and young adults involved in humanism. Thank you.